I am Edward Hertzman, founder and president of Sourcing Journal and Rivet. And today I am joined by Mark Cohen, director of retail studies at Columbia University. Welcome. And John Deputato, president of apparel for US at the NPD Group, to discuss the future of retail as it relates to the denim industry. Thank you both for joining me.
Nice to be with you.
So John, my first question is, as someone that has access to a tremendous amount of data, over the past few months, what have been people searching for when they've been at home during this period of, house arrest, if you will?
Sure. So, I mean, that's a great question. So, as I said before, MPD has optics across 20 different industries. So we have a real good understanding of what consumers are buying, right, across the country. And so what we saw a sales hit bottom around the last week of March, and then we saw a steady climb happen after the stimulus checks kicked in. Quite remarkably, this is quite incredible, over the past few weeks, units and dollars across all these industries are tracking on about as many sales as we had last year in units and dollars. Quite incredible. So I would break the purchasing up into a few groups. So early on, we saw the focus on necessities like toilet paper, paper towels, soap, sanitizers, things like that. But being in the center of the pandemic like we've been, we know it was hard even to get a food order back then, right? But at the same time, because of the quarantine, we saw a lot of sales on focusing on home. So people were setting up home offices. So we saw a sales surge on computers and tablets and webcams and office supplies. They were all up significantly. Waffle makers, bread makers, mixers, Roomba vacuum cleaners, and air purifiers. And basically, we saw this as a real pull-up of inventory sales, maybe even from holiday. Because we're at this point where a lot of manufacturers are beginning to run out of stock on these items. We saw sales on puzzles and toys increase versus a year ago. So you get the picture, right? Everybody's at home. And sales on mascara and eyeliner are through the roof as well. On the apparel side, there's these two forces that are coming together. First, it's what retailers are open and what people staying home are really craving for, and that's comfort, right? So the retailers that are open are Walmart, Target, Amazon, and dollar stores. So and these retailers are selling essentials like food, packaged goods, and cleaning supplies. But these retailers also sell apparel. So categories like sleepwear, innerwear, and socks doing very, very well. And swimwear, by the way, is now doing very, very well as people get ready for the summer. And if you sell denim and workwear through these stores, you're doing very well. And here are some incredible numbers, and I got these numbers from last week I thought I would share. Total apparel sales across the country are down only 1% versus last year at the same time. And units, right, on basic items, like the items I just discussed, in innerwear and sleepwear, up 11%. So if you have distribution in these retailers, your businesses are probably pretty good.
So Mark, a little bit different type of question. How do you think this period of this unprecedented time could change how consumers, well, that's a two-part question. Do you think it will change consumer values? And if so, how will it change the way they go out and consume and purchase moving forward?
All right, I'll answer your question in reverse order. Obviously, most of the business done in apparel and accessories is being done via online. And a significant amount of grocery and supplies are being done online, significantly more than before this pandemic hit. So the online business, generally speaking, which has been running like a house on fire for several years now, with some categories way ahead of others, is clearly driving the consumer space. There are customers who've been shopping online for a while, they're all in. There are customers who've been shopping online occasionally, they're all in. And there are customers who've never done any significant or any business online who are getting involved in a big way. I can't imagine how that acceleration of business over to this new marketplace is going to abate. It probably won't run at the same pace it's running at the moment, but this is a real kick in the pants for anybody and everybody who's got a legitimate online presence with an ability to fulfill orders in any kind of a reasonable, regular way. So the channels are changing, the marketplaces are changing, the malls, which have obviously all been completely closed up until very recently, who were in a weak place going into this crisis, are certainly not going to see a change in behavior in that regard, although they may see some surges as they suddenly open up, and I think that's being reported throughout the country. As far as where the customer's head is, well, they're flush with unemployment checks and government subsidies. Some are making more money net than they were making when they were working. But this isn't going to last. And the question of the ages is, of the 42 million and counting people who are unemployed, and I guess we just saw another nearly 2 million more jump into the unemployment rolls this past week. Of the 42 million, how many of them are going back to work? How many of them are going to be invited back to work? My guess is they're not going back to work at anything like that level, certainly not anytime soon. And so these unemployment benefits, absent some incredible follow-on in terms of government subsidy, those unemployment checks are going to run out. That government subsidy is going to be spent. They're going to load their credit cards up if they haven't already done it. They're going to discover their credit card limits have been lowered on them. They're not going to be able to shop the way they would like because they're just not going to have the financial wherewithal to do it. So in the face of that, their focus on needs, as it has been, will continue. The hoarding will abate because people have, bedrooms full of toilet paper and have kind of come to the view that they really don't need to acquire any more. So the supply lines will probably become more rational and more well managed in that regard. But the consumer who's been focused on things they really want, that they've got to have, is something we're going to have to wait a few years for to return. Sure, they're selling a lot. People are buying a lot of innerwear, a lot of underwear, a lot of basics because they're living at home. They're running out of clean clothing. But after you stock up on, a dozen pair of socks, do you continue to consume that way? I don't think so. So I think there's some enormous changes going on that were already evident before the crisis. There are some enormous changes that are taking place within the crisis. And when the crisis is finally over, and I don't think that's going to come anytime really soon, we're going to see some lasting changes that will have to be reckoned with.
I hope you are wrong, and I happen to agree with you. And I know people tend to think that I'm bearish, but I think this is going to be the harsh reality that I think our industry and many industries are going to have to deal with moving forward. So John, as stores slowly start to reopen, and for how long they stay open, if they do stay open, is a question. How do you predict back to school and holiday, specifically in the apparel category?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So obviously what happens with the virus obviously is going to have a direct effect on back to school, right? And also going to have a huge effect on the economy as well. It's critical that kids go back to school because it's critical that parents can physically go back to work, right? That's a big part of the economy. So in apparel, we know that about 80% of the volume at back to school is really done during 2 months, which is July and August. And this year, expect it to be a lot different. It's going to be much more spread out because really of how unsure we are about the virus. And I think that we're going to see individual states, right, open up differently. Now, especially with the civil unrest, we're probably going to see kind of a relapse and a restart as well. And we're watching this at the local level. So the stores open up and we return back to brick and mortar, it's going to be slow. So the survey data that we have right now is, shoppers are really, going to be slower going back. They want to see more sanitization. They want to see more touchless checkout. Social distancing is going to be important. And we have to be cognizant, right now of the unemployed and the second round, if a second round of stimulus eventually does come, right? So quite honestly, there's no playbook for this, but kids will need clothes because they size up, right? They grow. College students will be looking for new clothes. There is going to be some pent up demand for sure. As I mentioned, apparel sales to this point have essentially gone through, a few retailers. So as the retailers open up, obviously that demand will happen. And I do expect to see, a good deal of discounting and, the ability or, the objective to turn inventory over and kind of, and right size things. So back to school, the short answer is it's going to occur. Hopefully we'll see unit sales, and I say unit sales, be somewhat flat to last year. As far as holiday is concerned, it's such a long way off, right? It feels like a real long way off from now. Last holiday was the most promotional holiday that we ever saw in apparel. We saw online grow significantly, up about 4 or 5 points. And what really grew last year was BOPUS, which is buy online, pick up in store. Right? We saw significantly that uptick. And so I expect to see that as well. So holiday obviously is a long way off. I expect online to accelerate, BOPUS to accelerate, and the heavy discounting to continue.
Now, John, you have the data. So this is more me going off of gut and conversations that I'm having with factories and just talking, really upstream. But what I'm hearing, and Mark and John, if you hear otherwise, that the factories are operating at 10, 20, 30, 40% capacity, which means they're not getting the back to school orders. So if that is any indication of what retailers are planning for back to school, how do those numbers stay flat?
Yeah.
Well, there's an enormous amount of goods in the pipeline that have come through the pipeline that was heroically forced into the pipeline when China was closed and China reopened early in the year. That now sits on shelves. It sits on store shelves that are closed. It sits on warehouse shelves. It sits in containers. It sits somewhere. It's not available for sale to customers. And a lot of that hasn't been paid for, or if it's been paid for, it's been paid for in part. So how does a manufacturer justify opening up full production when they haven't been paid for spring, maybe early summer, and retailers are now talking about goods for a fall holiday? And consider the fact that the organizations that would be booking fall and holiday, back to school, fall and holiday, are on furlough. Maybe they're working at home, maybe they're just sitting at home. The fundamental issue that a retailer has is it can't plan without an open to buy. And an open to buy is the buyer's checkbook, the merchant's checkbook, the merchant planner's blueprint. And the fundamental requirement that an open to buy has is a sales plan. So how do you plan sales when A, you don't know when you're going to be able to reopen, B, you have no way of empirically understanding what the demand will be, not in industry terms, but in your store locations? So how do you base this suspense, this suspenseful window that everyone is in as a basis for forward planning? And that forward planning, by the way, extends well past holiday into spring 2021. So we're going to have an enormous amount of hoping, wishing, guessing, wondering, and at the end of the day, to John's point, I think the folks who are selling apparel now, like Amazon, Walmart, Target, Costco, are going to have a field day because they're going to be the purveyor of choice, and they've got supply lines that are open, and they're paying their bills, and they're accepting goods, and
they also have consumers have a reason to go to that store every week. While if you're an apparel only store, you don't have the frequency. So Walmart, through all that, some of that, to your point earlier, some of these retailers are benefiting and are going to gain more and more market share by the end of this. But I think, going back to, the supply chain conundrum is, I think you're right. No matter how good of a merchant or how good of a economist you are, there's an incredible level of uncertainty right now. So unless you completely have a very agile, unless your supply chain is very agile, very quick to respond, you don't tie up a lot of working capital and inventory, and can get in and out of merchandise very quickly, you're not well positioned. And you're not going to be well positioned moving forward. You definitely weren't well positioned before, but maybe through debt and leverage, you were able to succeed. But now, the new world will not allow you to plan 6 months out and buy 100,000 units of X. I mean, I don't think that's possible. Do you?
Well, you know, if you don't have cash, if you don't have liquidity, if you don't have a fortress balance sheet, the entire conversation is moot, because it's unlikely that new credit is going to be extended unless there's a belief that you're going to come through this crisis intact. There's got to be an enormous number of retailers who are on credit watch in advance of reopening.
Almost all.
Because who is going to put goods into work betting on the come that their customer, their retail customer, is going to be around to not only accept the goods but pay for them? I think the bankruptcies that we just started to see here and there are going to be legion as these organizations try to reopen their doors and discover they don't have enough cash. They're going to have to start paying rent or truing up their rent liabilities. They're going to have to pay for goods they haven't yet paid for. And of course, they're going to have to pay for the people they bring back into their organization. And that requires cash. So a well-capitalized business that's got a strong franchise with their customers, either through their retail customers or the ultimate customer, they've got every opportunity to figure this out and wait this out. Everybody else who's been limping along, making believe they know what they're doing, they're dead meat. And that includes some of the people who no one would have bandied about as bankruptcy bait, who I would suspect are very much in jeopardy.
Well, I know the factor community is quite bearish right now. Obviously, all these unilateral changes to agreements are not helping. The late payment terms are not helping. But I think that as these companies resurrect from bankruptcy or try to hold on for whatever period of time, if they don't create some level of confidence with the wholesale community or the vendor community or the factory base, they're not going to be able to keep getting goods, because to your point, Mark, they didn't want to pay for the goods that they ordered, or they canceled the goods, or they shipped the goods, or they received the goods without paying, and now they're trying to place new goods with extended payment terms. So everyone has lost trust throughout the supply chain, and there's a lot of fear as to should you take the order or should you not take the order. So one last question is, do you think there are certain categories in the apparel space that are more likely to rebound quicker? Or is this really, you know, like you said, once you take the basics out of the equation and the small little surge that we saw, is everyone kind of an even playing field? John, you want to start?
Sure. So, you know, if you think about the new workplace attire, you know, I would kind of start with that, kind of think about what the demand is. You know, we've kind of gone to a work from home thing, right? So you've gone to a one uniform. There was obviously a move towards casualization before, right? So think about that type of clothing. You also have a new essential worker, if you would, right? And then in the future, we'll see, you know, hopefully, you know, a reconstruction package as well. So I think what you're going to see is the continued casual look. And so from a clothing standpoint, you're talking about more casual clothing, right? So I think this is where denim, by the way, this is, you know, kind of what we're on kingpins today, right? This is, I think that denim, you know, is going to fare well out of this. And I think that, you know, as long as the manufacturers are providing, you know, the functional benefits to make sure that it's, you know, they're up to date and so on, I think denim should fare pretty well out of this.
Well, you don't want to be a dress manufacturer or a bridal dress manufacturer right now. Mark, what's your perspective?
Look, the denim business was pretty good going into this crisis. It's the universal fabrication. It's not a business that's been in any kind of decline from a consumer usage point of view. Indigo, blue, and black are the uniforms that resonate and have always resonated throughout the world. With the introduction of stretch in the yarn and fabrication, comfort has become more and more available to customers. And hand in glove with that, fashion and comfort and fit have been very, very successful. So the retailers who had increasingly powerful market share in denim, the manufacturers who had increasingly important market share on the supply side, they're going to be fine. They may not be selling as many customers as they were pre-pandemic, but they're going to be selling the folks who were doing business an awful lot of goods. To John's point, the casualization of the workforce, which has been going on for several decades, is going to accelerate. And categories that have kind of been kind of sleepy, like knitted t-shirts, are probably going to come back into vogue because people are raiding their bottom drawers in the back of their closets for things like that and discovering, gee, I really like wearing these kinds of things and I don't look stupid wearing these kinds of things and they're really comfortable. So I think that we're not going to see customers walking around, whether they're at home or they're working, naked.
Well,
But
that's my line, Mark. You can't steal that.
okay, sorry, I'll have to give you that that asterisk. But in point of fact, they're not going to get dressed up for very much, whether it's bridal or social occasion dressing or career dressing. I mean, you know, the trends that were emerging that were emergent or present pre-pandemic are going to be ever more evident on the other side of this, I think.
I agree. I agree. I think we're going to see all the things that we thought were trends before pandemic are now accelerating.
Well, I think the one thing we all know is that we don't know, and we're all gonna stay on our toes for the next few months or potentially the next year or two. So I appreciate both of your time. I think it'd be interesting to check in the next 30 to 60 days and see if we both have the same predictions that we do about the second half of this year as we do today. But I appreciate your time as always, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.